What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma. And first of all, I just want to let everybody know that it's been a year of podcasting. Last week was episode 52 for me. And I just want to thank you guys all from the bottom of my heart for tuning in, helping this show grow, and just all the support that you give. I didn't realize when I first started this how many people would care. So since I've done a year of podcasting, today is going to be the first episode of what I'm going to call season 2. And I'm so honored to bring a past guest that I've had on before that was one of my most popular guests. I've had the most requests for her to come back on than any of my other guests. And she's been on one time before where we told her story. I encourage you all before or after this to go listen to that. It was a really compelling episode and a lot of people tuned in for it. And this time around, I'm bringing her back and we're going to cover some other topics that I think will be of value to you and to everybody listening. And it'll give you a lot of information that you can take yourself and go ahead and educate other people. And as you'll see, it's kind of seasonal. We're going to talk about some things that are going on this time of year also with holidays. So my guest today is Lisa Meister. Lisa, if you guys aren't familiar with her, she is an SRA and occult survivor. She's a survivor of many other things, but that's what we've talked about in the past. And really that's what she specializes in, talking about and educating people on with her unique experiences. She's an author. She has 2 books out. She just launched one that we're going to talk about today. She's a podcast host. She is a mama bear, just an amazing woman. She's a wife, and she's a victor. I know that that's a word she's trying to use more, so I'm going to get in the habit of using it a little bit more. But Lisa's a victor in every single aspect of her life and just an inspiration to me. And I'm really excited to have her on. So Lisa, thank you so much for being here with me today.
I am always honored. Emma, happy birthday. 1 year. That is amazing.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I didn't even think about it while I was editing it, and I'm getting ready to post it. And I'm like, wait, it's episode 52. That means that I've been doing this a whole year. So man, I can't believe how fast it's gone by and how much I've learned. And I'm sure, having a podcast, and for people listening, Lisa's podcast, Only God Rescued Me, you guys should go subscribe to that. But you really do. It's like you bring people on and you expect that you're going to maybe learn a little bit, but that you're going to be educating other people. But I learned so much from all of you that come on and the different ways that you explain things and your different experiences. And I'm sure you feel the same way too.
Absolutely. It's not easy either. You're taking on what the stories are, you're shouldering them. You're thinking about it and trying to understand how people survived what they went through. And because you're talking to them, they become your friend. And then you care about them. How are they doing? I haven't seen them on Instagram for a while. Are they okay? And knowing that they may not be. So you are doing incredible work and you're putting out there our stories. And I appreciate you so much because you don't have to do that. You don't have to care. It's a lot easier to turn your eyes away because of the emotional turmoil that it takes to take on the stories. So you are a courageous woman, and I am so proud of you. I'm so happy to be your friend and to know.
I feel the same way. It's an honor to get to share your stories. People ask me that sometimes, like, is that heavy for you? And yeah, it is. But I was heavy not knowing this. And I know that not having truth in your life is a heaviness in itself. So being able to just understand how the world works and knowing too, I didn't experience this. I have the easy job of listening, and it's not easy to hear. And I do care about all of you so much. It's beyond heartbreaking for me to process these stories as I'm hearing them from you and to just picture these children going through this and even adults, but at the same time, it's an interesting concept, as you know, on your podcast. Most other podcasts, you talk about just the happiest things in people's life. And it's a good conversation. There's a lot to learn about successes, just as there are about really hard things. But I think that there's such a value in connecting about the hard things in life, because not everybody has good days all the time. And sometimes those conversations can feel superficial to people. And I think that there's such a beauty in connecting over the hard things that we've gone through in life and saying, hey, I'm human. It's okay if you're not making $1 million or have a successful business or, bought a Ferrari and have a private jet. Like, we all struggle and suffer, and there's beauty in connecting over that instead of just making it this perfect Instagram culture where I can only show up and talk to somebody, or I'm only going to be acknowledged if my story meets this criteria of being a success and having millions of dollars and a jet. It's real. This is something that 100% of people go through, are hard times.
Well, it's very easy to think it's important what you look like, what you're eating, what your income is, how you're jet setting, but those are not things that are going to bring joy and happiness, because if they did, there would be a lot more happy people. I think you're talking about what's real. Life's hard. I don't care who you are, life is hard. And learning how to through the hard things and to get past them and beyond them and to heal from them, that's where life gets real. And that's where you can look at the beauty of the blue sky and go, oh, look at that. That is just gorgeous. And you take that moment in, and that brings you this spark of life, and that's where things are real. And I look at some of these Instagram things and they just make me really tired. The cooking, the makeup, or look at wear this hat and then you'll be gorgeous, and I know people are into that, and it makes me sad watching it. It just makes me feel really down. And it's not like I'm into sad things, although I'm sure people around me believe that. But to me, it's like, can we move past the sad? Can we heal the sad? Can we live life with peace and with understanding of what's real and what's not, and move past that? And I think we can. And by talking about it in your podcast, I believe that helps people to be able to find that in the midst of whatever it is that they're going through, even if it may not be as severe as your guests. Everybody has rough stuff that they got to get past.
Exactly. And I think it helps make people more comfortable bringing those conversations to the table and saying, gosh, more people than I thought have gone through really horrible things. And these are normal looking people that have businesses and write books. Who in my life could be struggling or suffering that I just take for granted every day, and have a perfect conversation with them and never dive a little bit deeper and below the surface.
Right.
And I think
that's what I like about giving talks at churches or testimonies or podcasts and stuff, because then people come to me and say, I've never told anybody this, but this happened to me. And they've literally never told anybody their entire life. And you can just see the power that it still has on them, where if you express it and you start talking about it, then you can start dealing with it and moving past. So even if their story isn't the same as mine, they still have tragic things that need to be discussed and talked to, and they need to be heard and have a voice, and everybody should have that.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And you've been such an inspiration, like watching you do all these things. I'm fascinated in victors and survivors that show up and are able to be on a podcast and talk about it and write books about it. Because I know people that have gone through very little trauma in their life and they can't even get up off the couch. They're debilitated by it, and we all get like that sometimes. That's part of the human condition and experience. But man, going through and seeing people like you who have gone through just unthinkable and unfathomable things, be able to sit on the other side and stand in front of a crowd and educate them and make a difference like that. What a difference from point A, where you were and grew up, to where you are now, and how you've been able to, like you said, take what happened to you, process it, and then have this healing path where now you can educate people and be their inspiration and create a difference in the world from your experience, instead of letting it fester and eat you alive and stop your life in its tracks, which you'd have every right to do. Like, that would be justified.
Sure.
Like I said, it's
people that are there.
Yeah.
And they should not feel shame about that at all. They are seriously responding to the nasty things that happen to them, and that's a normal response. And I was there. I mean, I'm 52. I started this journey when I was 29, as far as remembering. Before that, I always had emotional problems. Like, I was falling apart, didn't know why. There's a lot of things that were going on in my life. But when I was 29 and then it hit, I mean, I'm 20 some years out from that now, but it was day after day after day crying on the couch. I remember crawling to the kitchen trying to get lunch for my kids. I mean, I really went through it. It's not like, oh yeah, that happened to me. Look where I am now. I'm just so happy. PTSD meltdowns where I'm in the closet with my back against the corner and nobody can touch me, just really have time, and nightmares every night, getting raped by groups of men and not being able to get, I've gone through it. But there is healing journey. And I always say it's a marathon. It's not a dash. I wish it was. I've heard people say I gave God 3 months to heal that for me, and that would be nice. But it takes decisions day by day. And knowing that I am not beaten, I am not broken, I am having normal responses to nasty things that happen to me. And then like getting in sync with your body instead of fighting it. And that's like big things that I learned, because I spent so much time at the beginning fighting every single memory that came out, and no, that couldn't have happened to you, that's too bizarre, and just like weeks before it's like, okay, yes, it happened. So it's not like I'm great, everybody else should be great too. It's let's just take where you are and let's go a step farther and let's get a step better. And we can do that. We can heal. No matter what happened to us, we can heal from that. And my journey was with God, and he came in and just did amazing things for me. So I was so broken, and I had this distorted view of God because of my dad, because we talked about this earlier, a lot of times we take the abuse and we put it onto God, and we think that that characterizes him. So like my dad, I was never good enough. I was convinced I'd get to heaven because I'm saved. I will get there, but just barely. And then God's going to tell me all the things I did wrong. And then I found a verse in the Bible in Zephaniah that says, he rejoices over me with singing. And I stopped. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. He rejoices over me with singing. He's not mad at me. He's not looking at my deficits. He's rejoicing. He's proud of me. He's saying, good job. Like, that's not my dad. That's my perfect heavenly father. And that's amazing, and it just changed my life. And just, little pieces and things through the years that just set me free. It's like the chains of SRA just kind of being let go one by one.
In your own words, just for people who might not have heard your first episode, would you be able to give just a brief definition of what SRA is for people who might not be quite as familiar with that?
SRA is an extremely sadistic, emotional, spiritual, sexual, physical abuse of young children and vulnerable adults that is in the act of worshiping Satan through blaspheming God and Jesus and his death and resurrection. So if you're worshiping God, you're just worshiping God. God, you're wonderful. God, you're great. Thank you for all you've done for me. If you are worshiping Satan, you do it through blaspheming God. So there will be Bibles, there'll be crosses, there'll be people dressed up as Jesus going around raping kids, a lot of blood, because Jesus, when he shed his blood on the cross, he did it so that we don't have to. Well, in the demonic, they want a lot of blood being shed all over the place, because the devil's going to take anything God's doing and the devil's going to pervert it and run the opposite direction. So Jesus died once for all, where the devil is trying to make everybody into a sacrifice, and he's trying to completely destroy each and every person. So he's destroying the victims that are there, the kids, but he's also destroying the people that are choosing to participate in it. They think they're lining up with him and he's going to give them all these favors and all these powers and things, and not. They're going to get destroyed and they're going to end up in hell, and it's not going to be them having this power in hell or being in charge of things. They are just going to be a victim of it. So, I mean, it's this huge, bad environment for everybody that's there. And I have no sympathy for the people that are choosing to participate in it. And I know some people do. I personally don't. But at the same time, the idea of anybody going to hell is horrible. And them choosing to line up with the devil, I don't know if I'm ever gonna understand that. I try, it's like there's just something inside of you. It's like if I could put my mind on it and understand it, then maybe SRA would be understandable. But it's just not. I'm somebody that tries to take a step back so that I can get a clearer picture and, can try to figure things out. But that one, I just can't. If anybody ever figures it out, please contact me and let me know. I would love to hear what you have to say. But why people are okay with torturing and killing children and babies and animals, I can't get my mind around that at all.
And the normal person can't, right? And that's why this gets so written off so many times. It's something people can't even confront mentally to consider that might be a possibility because it's too horrifying to even think about. And as somebody like you who's experienced it firsthand and went through it, the fact that you made a choice to not continue that generational pattern, that to me, I don't know how somebody could listen to you and still have empathy for somebody, because you're an example of somebody who made the opposite choice, and not everybody does that. I know it's something that does get carried down generationally and not a lot of people do get out of it. But the fact that there are people that have, that shows that it's not something that can't be broken. Everybody that's in there doing that has a choice. And you were an example of somebody who decided to do the complete opposite of what the examples were that you saw growing up. Now, how does somebody like you go about getting their body back in sync after going through all of that? And then at 29 years old, you have kids and husband, and you're experiencing all of this as if you don't already have 20 million other things on your plate, being a mom and a wife and everything else that you're doing. How does somebody start that process? And especially, how did you do it?
I think it's different for everybody. Like there's no two survivors that are going to heal the same. Just like if you take two people and you do the exact same abuse to them, they're going to react in two different ways. So every survivor is going to react to the abuse and they're going to react to healing in different ways. For me, it was like flashback after flashback was coming. I had no control over them. They were, it's like you're right there. Like you lose reality, you lose where you are, your family has to try to ground you and bring you back. And my kids were small. They were like 1, 3, and 5 when this started for me. So they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what was going on. My husband had to go to work every day. I'm crying on the couch. Like,
oh my gosh.
They were running amok. I was so worried someone was going to come and take them from me because I could not take care of them very well. Changing diapers, trying to get food. It was a very difficult process. So we just kind of mucked through it as best we could. And I was fighting the flashback so hard. Come on, Lisa, there's no way this could happen to you, because the rituals are so out there crazy. And because as a child, you're being drugged. And then, so that distorts what you're seeing and how you're understanding things. And then there's a huge level of smoke and mirrors where they can make things appear that they're happening, even when they're not. Like they do these surgeries on you where you really feel like they're putting a bomb inside of you, or, and that's not really happening, but they really put you in a lot of pain and suffering, and they can produce blood and all sorts of stuff where you think that it really has. So when you're as an adult looking at these things, it's like, I am just cracking up. There's no way this could be real. I have crossed over into crazy. And then a lot of people don't believe us, because then we're trying to explain through the drug haze and being a child in the smoke and mirrors, and it's not going to make a lot of sense. And so people oh, you are crazy. And then they're not going to listen to you. And then we become these adults where no one's going to believe us, and most people don't. And then we're kind of stuck. So looking at them myself and seeing these flashbacks, and the way the flashback would go for me was some intense, horrendous pain would hit me. That would make no sense. And I would be there for several days in excruciating pain, not knowing, like, how could they have hurt that? Like once I had a ring of burn inside my vaginal area, just like a ring of it. I'm like, what, what in the world would even cause that? And then a few days later, a flashback would hit that would perfectly explain the pain that I was having. So in this flashback, I lived in northern Michigan. We had a lot of snow, we had a lot of icicles, and we were outside in this cabin area, and they took an icicle, broke it off, inverted it, and put it inside of me. I'm like, that explains that ring of burn, where there was nothing I could come up with. I mean, like, how would you explain that? I mean, you're just blank. It's like, I don't know what explains it. And then all of a sudden, so it was too perfect. There's no way you could make that up. And my husband explains it, like, if you were there seeing her having the emotional fall apart when these flashbacks hit, you would never not believe it. He's like, I was there, I experienced it. Yes, it was real. And yes, that happened to her. So accepting that, finally, instead of fighting each one, oh no, that couldn't have happened, just say, okay, what's this one? And I was interviewing John on my podcast one day, and he said someone told him, when a flashback hits, give it a week. Don't fight it. Don't say, no, that couldn't have happened. Yes, that happened. He said, just sit with it for a week and then deal with it. And I see great wisdom in that, because it gives you a little distance. You're not in emotional upheaval from having it. And then you can look at it. And so for me, I started having new flashbacks again in January, unfortunately. And so now I look at them.
And that's this year.
This year, yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, that was really bad. And just accepting it, that must have been really hard. It's like talking to my dissociated parts. So whatever part had that happen to her, which is me, it's complicated, but saying, that must have been really hard for you. I'm really sorry, that never should have happened. And then bringing that part to Jesus so that part can get healed. And he just has these wonderful ways of, meeting that part and talking to the part and healing the part. And it's just this wonderful thing. And I get done, I'm going, oh, that was just, and it's like this weight goes off your shoulders a little more, because all those things happen, they're all weighing you down. And it's like the steam valve every time you get a flashback, even though it's terrible. Now it's like, finally, another thing we can deal with and let go. So instead of fighting it, instead of fighting my body, I'm now listening to it and going along with it. And it's making the healing process way easier than it was back when I was 29 and kicking and screaming the whole way. Lisa, you're crazy. Lisa, you're stupid. Lisa, what's the matter with you? Get yourself together and just get up and get moving again. And you can't, no matter how you talk to yourself, you cannot. So it takes a while.
It makes me wonder too, how many people get misdiagnosed and actually do go crazy because nobody can tell them accurately what's going on with them. Schizophrenia and bipolar. Those are so common. And I don't doubt that there are a good percentage of those people that actually do have that. But for the rare person like you, that's not even studied in psychology, like satanic ritual abuse, MK Ultra, different types of mind control, even hypnosis, which is so much more commonplace and something that I went and got educated on what that was, right? And I didn't need to experience it as a child. Like, I went and chose to do that. And it's interesting that these things can be so healing to understand and to have a bird's eye view on, but they're just completely stripped away of any medical text. And in these institutions that people go study 6, 8, 10 years, and that's never brought up one time that, hey, you might have a patient that could come in and has this. So I think too, it's easy to blame therapists at the same time, and they can go do their own research. A lot of them too choose not to look beyond what their text says, right? But it's really the fault of how the system's built. It's designed to ignore victors like you who have these stories, and it's propagated in movies like it's fictional. So when people do hear it, it sounds so out there that it's like, that can't be real. You have to be having a delusion. It has to be a hallucination, right? And even with those aches in your bodies, our bodies store emotions, right? And so for people too, I want to make a point to say this, that are saying, well, how did you physically feel it? that is what pain is a lot of times for people, and they're unaware. It's not just that, but emotions are energy and they store in our body just like a normal pain and our pain receptors do. And we can feel emotions sometimes. And I mean, a good example is think about when somebody is sad all the time. What do? They curl up and they put their head down and they cross their arms all the time. They're not open, right? And over time, somebody's shoulders can end up developing to where they're permanently here and their neck is permanently forward. And they end up getting a physical ailment where if they try to move out of that, it's very painful. Our bodies adapt to pain sometimes, and you can release it by actually understanding the memory behind what went into that. When I was a fascial stretch therapist many years ago, we worked with the tissue in somebody's body to help release pain, however that was manifested. And that worked with the emotional system too. And sometimes I would be working on people, and let's just say somebody had shoulder surgery. And after you get surgery and it's healing, you're very guarded. So you don't have the same range of motion a lot of times as your good shoulder. And that can go for any part of your body. And so when you can actually get somebody to relax enough to where you can move their shoulder and like that full range of motion that happened before their accident or whatever it was that injured their shoulder. I've had people that were totally fine getting on the table, break down and cry because the tissue released the emotion, which brought the physical emotion into their body. And they didn't necessarily always have the memory for it. It just was this release. They just start bawling their eyes out. And I'd have these giant men that I would be working on that would just cry. And they're like, I'm so sorry, I can't control it. Like it's involuntary, And it's like, no, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. Like that was stuck there, and it's gone. And that's beautiful that you experienced it, and there's a lot of truth to that. And I wonder that too about all the pains that we experience, like how much of that is trauma, but hearing that example that you said, that can almost be unbelievable to tell a therapist that like, hey, I felt this pain that was actually real in my body. And nothing happened to me. It was a memory that caused it. That too can even be like, all right, you're crazy. And it's like, no, we have such a misunderstanding of how connected our mind and our body are, and realizing that and hearing those examples, it's very, very true to life. And any normal person can feel that if they've had some type of trauma in their body, there's an emotional attachment stuck to that somewhere. And what would therapists, so whenever you would go talk to people, what were you told some of the times? Like what were some of the things that were wrong that you were told personally?
Well, I had a lot of really good ones, none that really understood SRA. Like I was the first person that presented and that sort of thing, but they were very good, very understanding. Now, trying to find a therapist sometimes, some people would treat me badly. Like this one psychiatrist, I was explaining that I was an SRA survivor and she leaned forward, does the government know? And I just up and out, it's like, I'm just not gonna deal with this. It is, no matter how people treat us, we have to respect ourselves and our body enough to say, I will not be treated this way. And we have that ability to walk out. So there's always going to be people that are going to try and talk us out of what we know is true. And we don't have to listen to that. So I believe it's very important having a team of people around you, and it's finding those people that will back you up. So like finding a pastor, and my husband and I would go and just kind of give a little basic outline so that they would understand that I'm an SRA survivor. And the good ones were like, what can I do to support you? I've never experienced this before, but how can I help you? Or even the pastor I have right now, he's like, well, would you give a testimony at church? Like in front of everybody? And he's like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, like that's amazing. It's like really amazing. But some people, it's like, don't tell anybody, this, like, it's the shameful thing. So you just have to be careful with who you're around. And like, there's people that fall out of your life, like they find out, they're like, I don't want anything to do with you. It's like, well, I'm really glad to know that about you. Goodbye. I don't need you, and like to walk away from your family. I don't have anything to do with my parents or my brothers or that side of the family, and it was really painful at first, but it was really weird because I realized that I did not miss them specifically. Like my mom, I realized that I had no relationship with her, that I did not miss her as a person at all. Now I missed her office, but she was never somebody on my side. She was never helpful to me. She was always condemning. I was on bed rest with my daughter for 3 months, and it was touch and go. I mean, she was almost born several times, and I had um, an IV in my leg, giving me around the clock meds to help stop contractions. I mean, it was just incredible. And she was telling me I was making it up. Like, based on what? What makes you think that I'm making this up? If I've been to the hospital, there's real contractions, I'm actually dilating, I've got this pump in my leg giving me but her thing was, well, you just make these things up, it's not real, you can get up and work, you're just being lazy. Or she came once right after I had my second child, and it was a couple days after I'd been home from the hospital, and she's talking to my dad on the phone. Oh yeah, she's happy being lazy and just lying around not doing anything. Like, they just had a baby, and so your family even are people that you need to walk away from. They're very toxic. And if you stay with them, then you're putting your children in risk, because then they can access them. And, I have so many stories of survivors' children being accessed by the grandparents. You walk away from people who do those sort of things, and look at it as a gift. If someone's nasty to you, say, I'm really glad to know that about you. Now I don't need to invest in you as a friend. And it's not being cold and it's not being nasty, but it's a way of protecting yourself enough how you'll be treated and what you allow and what you don't allow, because you're the gateway of that. And, there's some survivors that I know that are in their room all the time and they never leave it. But that's their way of respecting themselves and keeping themselves safe. And that's what they need to do, and hopefully we can them and help them feel support, come alongside them in however we can. But it's just, people that have been abused have a lot of things that they need to work through, and they're going to do it at their pace, and you got to line up with them and help them as best as you can.
Now, aside from therapy, what other things have you personally done that have been really beneficial for your progress?
For me, writing is a big one. So any kind of creative outlet that you have, art, music, I like to play the piano, and it's a good way for me to express things that I can't in any other way. Or it's a place for dissociated parts to have an expression when they don't have one in any other way. And that it's just like this balm that kind of comes in to your heart. For me, the podcast, or Instagram posts where I'm fighting back and I'm saying that this is not okay. I'm exposing and telling what happened and explaining it to the world. That's helpful for me, and it's an outlet. Going for walks. I love going for walks. My husband will go to the, there's no mountains around here, but hills or woodlands or wherever we can, and just get away and enjoy nature. I've got a pond by the side of my house. There's a blue heron that comes, sitting and watching, I've named him Harry, and, he and I have conversations, and it's just wonderful. Or, just enjoying the world that God has given me, and just really for me, relishing in having a perfect dad in God. He's my daddy God, and just being able to trust him, and he does everything exactly the way I need it done. And he knows how to speak to me and to help me and to encourage me. And reading the Bible, I just love it. It's just so wonderful. It's relaxing. It's encouraging to me. But then the more I read it, especially the Old Testament, there's so much against evil and judgments that he brings to, there's a lot of SRA talk actually in the Old Testament. And God is very angry with all those who participate in it. And there's judgments that he'll pull out for those that are responsible for these sort of things. And that's even comforting to me, that he's not okay with these he's not okay with trauma. He's not okay with people that are purposely hurting other people, or he's not okay with people that are lining up with the devil and whatever witchcraft and rituals and voodoo and spells and, incantations, whatever they're doing. He's not okay with it. And they may seem like they're getting away with it down here, but they're not. It's like, what do we get on this world? Maybe 80, 90 years if we're lucky. The pandemic, maybe not so many, but the devil may have them for that amount of time, and he may be giving them money. They may have power and authority in government, and they may be making decisions, with the pandemic that's taking away people's rights and, the sex trafficking and all that stuff that they seem to be getting away with. But even Epstein came to an end of what he was doing. So he got away with it for a lot of years, but he didn't get away with it forever. So even that's encouraging to me. It's like, okay, I was in it for 18 years, but I got out and I got away. I'm talking to a survivor. She was in it till she was 40 before she could get out, but she got away and she's living her life. The devil hurts us, but he can't do it forever. There is a point where the people that are doing these things are going to stand before God for what they did to us. And that's just really helps me that it's not okay. Because otherwise you feel like, oh, they get away with it. They got a lot of money doing it. Nothing ever happened to them. But it's like, no, only for a while. Epstein, how much money did he have?
Oh my gosh.
How much did he get away with? All the time, all over the place, but there is an end. So
you said, even if people don't ever get caught in their whole life and they die at 90 years old and it goes to the grave with them, it stops at the grave. They still have to go face Jesus and face God after that, and so that can be really comforting too. I think just realizing that even if somebody here isn't penalized in this life, the afterlife for them is not going to be ideal for them at all. Well, it will be ideal for them, but that's not something that anybody wants to experience, what they're going to have to live forever with.
Right. Yeah. And it's not worth whatever they got. People can be rich their whole life, but they don't take it with them. And everybody knows that, and once you're dying, it really doesn't make so much difference how much money you've got. You're going to face God and, whatever decisions you made in your life. So let's make sure they're the right ones. Let's get right with God and have a relationship with him. And that's where my healing is. And that's where my joy in the world is. It's in the things of God that make me so happy. I'm never happier than when I'm worshiping God just by myself, anywhere, just me and God. And it's just, it's so nice. So like I've seen the worst that the world has to offer in rituals. It's horrible. It's really, really bad. But then I've also experienced God, and it's so wonderful. And so I see that as like this line in the sand. You've got the devil and you've got God. Let's go to God. He's got the best way. He's got the best things. He can make me happy. Even in the midst of circumstances that are swirling around me that maybe aren't comfortable, I know that I'm right with God, and that just, and that's where life is, experiencing the things that God's given us in good ways.
And I know for you, getting there wasn't easy. What was that path like? Because I think right now more than ever, there's people that are falling further away from God with everything that's going on in the world. Even if they weren't really close with him, they've almost let him go. And there's a lot of people that were close with God that are not anymore. On the same token, I think there's more people getting closer to him, but the polarities now are so different. And I'm sure, I know you mentioned before we hopped on here that you've been actually getting contacted a lot. People seem to be struggling extra, and I think that with all the trauma going on in the world, people that aren't victors and survivors, they're dealing with a lot of stress. And then it can be even worse for somebody who's experienced a lot of trauma in their life and might not even have to do with what's going on in the world versus this spiritual battle that we're fighting right now. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because you have some really great insight on how you've guided those conversations with people who approach you.
Well, everybody can agree that things are way more difficult now You've got the pandemic, you've got governments trying to take more control, you've got people that don't have jobs, or they don't have, people have a lot of financial issues, a lot of people with severe medical issues going on right now, a lot more cancers, a lot more people that are, in the hospital with all these really scary things going on. Everybody is affected right now by where the world is. I believe that because we're getting to the end, and in the Bible, it talks about that when we're getting to the end, and it tells you what the end is going to be like. And it talks about a great falling away where people are going to just walk away from God. And we're seeing that all over the place, which is really concerning, but it's expected. So what's going on is because we're getting to the end, that this fight between God and Satan is at a greater confrontation than it's been, because the devil knows his time is really short. He's going to take out everybody he can along with him. SRA is all lining up with him, getting him to the end, bringing in the Antichrist. They've got these soldiers. So like SRA victims that have not been able to get out. And so maybe they align themselves with the occult and they become the next perpetrators. Those people have been programmed. So when the Antichrist comes, he's going to have these soldiers of people that can just go and do what he's telling them to do because they've been programmed that way. And he can do and say certain things, and you're going to get behaviors from people that are going to go with what he's saying. They're going to be killing people. There's just going to be mass craziness everywhere. And we're seeing some of that already. So I believe that there's this even more intense spiritual battle that's going on. And right now, it really affects SRA survivors. So I have so many people contact, they're just really tormented by demons right now, more so than ever, aren't able to get away from it, people needing deliverance just at a really high level right now. So to be able to combat it, the only way, because this is spiritual, is through God. So you got to get as close to God as you can get. So that includes salvation, accepting Jesus as your savior. He died on the cross, he rose again, and that you're going to live for him and you're going to live for God. And then understanding that God is not like your personal dad. So for me, getting my dad out of the way so I could see God, who he really is. Like, God is loving, but he is love. So that means he only reflects love to me. He's never crabby. Like, I love my husband, but sometimes I'm crabby. Sometimes I've said really mean things to him, which I feel really bad about, but I don't always reflect love to him. Well, God will only reflect love to me. Now, he might say, hey, Lisa, you need to change in this area, and correct me, but he doesn't do it in this nasty way like my earthly dad did. He was just nasty, horrible, nasty guy. God's not like that. So I get as close to him as I can get. I read the Bible, I pray, I go to church, I do what I can to talk to people around me about God. I love talking about, what I just read in the Bible. I just read in Malachi, and God comes and he puts his foot on the high place and it melts. Now, the high places in the Old Testament is where they went to sacrifice kids to foreign gods, to Molech, to all the gods that they did, Tophet. And so if he comes and he puts his foot there and it melts, that means he's going to get rid of all the SRA places. And he's going to take them out. It's like, yes, that's wonderful. So I get excited about that sort of stuff. So people around me, I'm sure, get really tired of hearing all the SRA references I find in the Bible, but they're like all over the place, which to me says this has been an ongoing problem between God and the devil going all the way back to Babylon. So we get close to God because that's where safety is. Where God is, the devil cannot be working. Right? He can't. He doesn't have enough power. So the closer we get to God, the more we can align ourselves with God. The devil can't get in. We get this hedge of protection. Psalm 91 talks about angels surrounding us, keeping us in all our ways, lifting us up lest we dash our foot against the stone. That means we're protected. I had a tornado come to my house one day. It came to my front door, stopped, went around and went off. So it's like angels there protecting. There's no reason it didn't take my house out. other than we have angels that will protect us. And we do spiritually as well. So if they're doing witchcraft, if they're doing voodoo dolls, whatever it is that they're doing against us, and Halloween is coming up, they do a lot of rituals that are attacking survivors that are trying to get free. So we have that protection that we can call in, and that any curses, we send them back. Lord, I just rebuke these curses and just send them back from where they came from. In Jesus' name, we call in that hedge of protection, and whoever's doing it, just stop them so that they won't be doing this anymore. And we pray that way. And the survivors need to understand that God's on their side, that he's bigger than whatever demonic thing that was put against them. God's bigger than that, and that he will protect them. But you got to kind of love them into that, because their experience has been that I haven't been protected. So now they need to understand that God is their protector, and that, we can rebuke all that nasty stuff that's sent our way. But it's a process of learning and growing, and, in our walk of faith. Also realizing that you are safe. It's looking around, looking at your walls. Oh, my walls are blue. Oh, my ceiling, I've got sparkles on my ceiling, which is really kind of cool. But looking around and seeing I am in this space. I am not a child. I am not being abused right now. I can feel the carpet under my feet. I am right here. I am okay. And it's talking yourself through that. It's parenting yourself. It's momming yourself. I am okay. God is my refuge. God is protecting me. The enemy cannot take me anymore. And just talking yourself through those hard times, that the panic that survivors go through at night. It gets dark, they're alone, there's nobody to talk to, and the enemy just starts attacking them. But it's in those spaces, putting on worship music, getting out your Bible and going over a verse of protection. God is here. He is with me. I am not a child. I am not being abused. I am okay. And really accepting that as truth, because it is. You are okay. You're an adult now. You can protect yourself. When you're a child, you didn't have that. And the parents that God had given you to protect you, or the grandparents or the uncle, whoever it was that put you in it, they chose to not do their God-given responsibility of keeping you safe. But you're an adult, and that's your job. And I don't go around any demonic things. So then we get to Halloween, which really irritates me to no end, because there's so many people that celebrate it and think, oh, it's just candy and it's just masks. Just let the kids have fun. What's the matter with you? But it's not. It's the celebration of everything demonic, and everybody knows that, because what's the iconography of it? It's the gore, it's the demonic, it's the Grim Reaper robes, which is exactly what
Or
the
double
people
costumes.
Yeah, it's exactly what they do. It's the exact things that are part of the rituals. And now it's everywhere because people are decorating with it. Skeletons, they kill people. Even the jack-o'-lanterns, to me, they're like the skulls they would have in these rituals. They have skulls with candles in it. And to me, that's what a jack-o'-lantern is. So it's very, very triggering to survivors. And it's very scary for the little kids that are going through it, because I was a kid going through that. I survived all those Halloweens, but there's a lot of kids that didn't. There's kids that they're allowed to kill. There's kids that they're not allowed to kill. There's breeding that's done. So like teenagers, they're impregnated, and, they let them get 4 or 5 months, and then, Halloween comes. So then they will abort the baby and then sacrifice the baby. So there's a lot of really nasty things. There's nothing positive about Halloween. Period. So it's ironic to me. They're killing some kids, they're giving candy to others, and we're like, oh, it's just candy and fun. There's nothing wrong with it. Yes, there is something wrong with it. So if you are taking your kids around trick-or-treating, or you're, doing the candy and the costumes, or even the stuff that they do at churches, trunk or treats, we're giving an alternative, but it's still doing the same stuff. You're still doing elements of candy. You're still doing elements of dressing up. It is still participating in it. Don't do it. Do not do it. Have nothing to do with it. Just let the demonic know, and let the people who are participating in it know, I refuse to line up with you. I refuse to line up with what you're doing. I'm going to do it God's way, and make that line in the sand and be willing to stand it. It's like, okay, I might look stupid to everybody. I don't care, because it's the right thing to do. Just like with you doing your podcast, there's a lot of people that disagree with what you're doing, but you're saying, I'm doing the right thing and I'm going to stand by it. It's exactly the same thing. We have that ability to stand up. We have that ability to make a stand and let everybody see it. And it's not that hard to turn your light off on Halloween and not have anybody come to your house. And they know that person doesn't participate in Halloween.
And that's always been really interesting to me. I've never been a huge Halloween person, but it was always interesting to me just how scary it all is. And it's like every other holiday, it seems, has this really positive message behind it or something to celebrate. And then you have this holiday where everybody watches horror movies and they dress up in these really horrific things. And when I heard you talking about Halloween, it totally opened up my eyes, because I haven't really talked about holidays or gotten into that with other victors and survivors that I've talked to and the meaning behind it. But I've been starting to look into that, because I know that there are calendars in the satanic world that they abide by every year, and learning how demonic Halloween is and how it's really a way to have society give energy to this horrific, all these horrific rituals that they do. Because if we're participating in it, and they're, even if people aren't spiritual or even if people aren't believers, they are. And so our energy feeds and propels what they're trying to do, and they're getting our consent and our participation in something that is so horrific. And even learning about horror movies, I think it was either you or a guest on your podcast that mentioned that even horror movies really are mocking, and that's really what Halloween does. It mocks rituals and what these children actually go through. And there's costumes, and maybe it's robes, but there's still something that people are wearing in a ritual. There's masks that are worn, and we're doing that too. So I can only imagine how horrifying that is for children that are actually going through this, to be like, gosh, I'm so happy I'm out of my house. And then they go out on the town and there's all these people wearing all these scary things, and they turn on the TV and there's scary movies playing. And I can't even imagine how triggering that has to be. And it's something that people aren't even aware to be empathetic of, which I think is the worst part, right? Like, we're taught that this is a fun celebration. Girls get dressed up in these cute outfits and they go out and get drunk, and people party and have good times. And it's not even brought into our consciousness the other side of the coin, and what a lot of other people are going through during this time, and that we're not able to be there for them because we don't even know that we need to be.
Right. Well, at a church, they had the youth pastor speak, and his title was Ghost Stories. And he was talking about the Holy Spirit, and that's where he went with it. But it was so hard for me walking in there knowing that that's what we're talking about. So my husband and I sat in the back row in case we needed to leave. But, we got through, his talk of, oh, Casper, the, friendly ghost, and we used to watch this and that, and, Scooby-Doo and that sort of stuff. And so I had to sit through that to get to where, he started talking about the Holy Spirit, and I didn't appreciate that. It's like, why are we doing this in a church? I know you think it's, oh, this is seasonal related and isn't this great, but for survivors, it's just hard. I had to make a decision. Do I go sit there or do I leave? And it put me in this dilemma that I'm not happy about. So, going into stores, every store is just incredible right now. It's everywhere. It's in your face. You can't get through the store without seeing it. I don't like being put in that position. So I had to start dealing with it by going into those stores, and Grim Reaper are the hardest. So it was walking up to them and forcing myself to stare at it. And this was my mental process. It's not real. It was just a person in there. It wasn't a demon in there. It was a real person. They were choosing to harm me. This is just because somebody's stupid and they think this is cool. This isn't even a person. I'm not harmed by this. And then forcing myself to stare at it and trying to calm my heart rate down, and just, so it was a few years of doing that. So now I can go in, I still don't like it, but it doesn't throw me. Like I used to walk when my kids were still living at home. We go in the store and they go, Mom, look to the right, Mom, look to the left, Mom, look down, Mom, trying to protect me from having to see that stuff, because you had to go in the store, you have to eat.
Yeah.
You cannot not go into stores. You still have to buy stuff. So like trying to make a big trip when you go, but it's just uncomfortable. And so for me, it's uncomfortable because that was my experience. It was real. There really were Grim Reaper people walking around, and they were harming me, and I never knew if they were going to kill me. And that's terrifying to a child. You don't know. Whatever they do is going to be horrendously painful, and it's going to involve sexual abuse of some sort, and it's going to be nasty. It's terrifying. So why do we go and say, oh, isn't that fun? And why do you say it's just costumes and it's just candy when it's not just costumes and candy, it's all the other stuff with it. So I don't agree with Halloween, and I don't think anybody ought to be celebrating it.
And even with horror movies, I used to be a fan myself whenever I was really young. And I look back and I'm like, what was it? Like, that's actually really sick that people are attracted to that and like find fun in watching it. Because if it was something that a friend or a loved one or one of our soldiers, whoever, if we saw a heading that somebody, a real person went through that, we would be disgusted and appalled and want whoever committed that crime to be sentenced to the absolute highest degree. But yet we pay and we make those movies number one at the box office, and it's really torture porn. And like how you or your guest said on your podcast, it's actually really mocking what actually happens in rituals, a lot of those movies. And that completely blew my mind, because I hadn't even ever considered that, and just to think that some of this could be based or is based on almost normalizing and again giving energy to the demonic. And we're looking at it like entertainment and paying for it and watching it and being obsessed with it and getting posters and dressing up, and it's like, gosh, what an interesting concept that we celebrate that when it's called entertainment, but we look down on it when it actually happens. But we ignore it when it actually happens, and we pay attention to it when it's actually on a movie screen or when we can click it on our TV.
Right. What if we made a holiday celebrating what just happened in Afghanistan, in Kabul at the airport, and we just started decorating with that and celebrating it? Everyone would go, no, that's stupid. You wouldn't do that. That's horrible. Well, it says people there. It's not just me. There are hundreds of thousands of us worldwide right now. I have contacted by people from so many countries, and their stories are almost identical to mine. It's not just somebody's coming up with this, but it's all of our stories are so similar. It's scary, but it's because the devil just, he's not that creative. He does the same thing over and over and over again, and has been, back in the Old Testament, they were putting their kids through the fire. They were sacrificing them there too. It's the same thing throughout all of time, because that's what the devil does. And that is the most evil that he can get anybody to do, is in those rituals. And that's where he gets a lot of power. And, by getting people to line up with him, he's getting he's got this army. And we know it because we see so many evil things all over the place. The devil's busy. He's really busy. So we should not be lining up with him. We should be fighting him. It's not just that these people show up on, All Hallows Eve or Devil's Night or whatever and start doing these rituals. They're getting ready for them months ahead of time. They got to get all these girls pregnant, and then they're doing all these rituals, preparing for the rituals and getting themselves, whatever. It's not getting them pure. What's getting them more evil, I guess, preparing them to do what they're doing. It's a long process every year. And then that night they're getting their yearly assignments for the next year, how the demonic's going to be working and what they're going to be doing. It's a big deal. So we need to
about what makes
fight it.
Can you talk a little bit about how Halloween's a little bit different than other rituals, and that process of what exactly do they do to prepare and how long? Because that right. Alone should open people's eyes to be like, why am I celebrating this, when you actually hear the intention behind this big day for them?
Well, they got to sacrifice a lot of babies. So Every group is going to be doing that, and they have to come up with these babies to do it with. Now, you cannot have a baby that's born in a hospital because they're going to have a birth certificate, and you can't have a child disappear. So that means they're going to take kids in these families that have grown up in it. So for me, when I became a teenager, then they would impregnate me so that they, several months out, because you need a baby 4 or 5 months ish, so it looks fully formed and whatever by the time it's born. So that's that many months getting somebody pregnant, getting them through these pregnancies. They're praying over, they've got their crazy cursing that they're doing over this baby because they want, I don't understand what all, I really don't want to know all that they're doing, but they're preparing this baby so that they can kill it, so that they can get whatever power out of it they think they're going to get. And they do. The devil will give them power. You can feel the energy going through your body of the demonic. So like if you're someplace and all of a sudden your hair sticking up like something's really creepy, that's some kind of demonic power that you're feeling. So it's a real thing. So, they're getting demonic energy from, making this girl go through labor and having this baby, killing the baby, or making the mom kill the baby, which is horrendous. They're doing really bad things to get this power. So it's months preparing everybody. This is your job. This is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to do it. They have their chanting that they've got to have ahead of time. A lot of times it's in other languages, or it's in some kind of demonic sounding something. I don't know how they do it really. So all that stuff is being prepared, and they know the rituals, they know the curses that they're speaking, the spells they're casting, and everybody knows witches have all sorts of really weird ingredients for the spells. My husband and I went into this coffee shop in town. Felt really weird when we walked in. It's like something just feels creepy, and there was like palm reading on the side going on, and then they had actual ingredients for the spells that they do, like really odd stuff for sale around this coffee shop. It was a witch's coven place. I mean, it was weird. And they even had like this witch's picture on the wall, some witch society in that area, and everybody knows that part of town is pretty witchy in general. There's just a lot of it, witches in that area, Irvington, Indianapolis. So like we walked right into the middle of it. And so a friend of mine said, well, did you drink the coffee? And I'm like, well, sure I did. I prayed over it. I broke any curses off of it. I drank the coffee. Not a big deal, because it doesn't scare me, because God is bigger, and he's given us power, and he's given us authority. We can break that. So, that stuff exists. It is out there, and they have to get all those ingredients ahead of time. And they have to, it like Christmas, we spend time, we get a tree, we get ornaments, we get gifts that we're going to give people. We're going through the Christmas story, reading it with our family about Jesus being born, and, going back into some of the scriptures in the Old Testament that was foreshadowing Jesus coming, and celebrating Jesus. Now, some people disagree, you shouldn't celebrate the tree and all that stuff, whatever, but we're celebrating Jesus. And we prepare for that. And it's the same thing with the demonic. They're preparing for Halloween, because Halloween is this huge spiritual holiday for them.
Is it the biggest spiritual holiday of the year too?
Yeah, it's one of the top 3 for them. But that's when they're getting their direction for the next year. So that's really important for them.
And do kidnappings from children outside of the occult go up during that month too? Is that part of the preparation?
Yes, and especially from the foster system. So we get 800,000 kids a year disappear. A lot of them are out of the foster system, and we never get closure for those kids. They're never found, ever. So where do they go? They're, a lot of them are being killed. A lot of them are getting into the sex traffic nowadays, and getting sent around the world. But yeah, in satanic rituals, a lot of them are being killed.
Oh my gosh. Are there other holidays? I know Halloween is the obvious one that, hey, we're celebrating. You can tell just by what we're dressed as and what we focus on that this is demonic. Are there any holidays that people look at as a good thing and it's not as visible that it could possibly be evil? Are there other holidays that have these demonic meanings behind it?
Well, a lot of our holidays are actually good. We're celebrating good things, but the devil will take them and he will twist them and pervert them. So Good Friday is a really bad one because the whole thing in worshiping the devil is mocking the death and resurrection of Jesus. So in rituals in general, they'll try to get a kid as close to death as they can and bring them back, and that's mocking it. But when you get to Good Friday, there's a lot more of that happens, and getting raped on top of crosses, and kids getting put on crosses, like tied on them and stuff like that, and just really mocking what Jesus did. So that's another one where survivors really fall apart, and it's a struggle trying to get everybody through it and trying to help everybody. So it's not like that's the holiday and it's just a bad one. It's actually a really good one. Jesus actually did come, he died, he rose, celebrate that. But the devil comes in and twists and makes it really bad. Majority of house satanic stuff all around them to make them really bad. So a lot of survivors just fall apart every holiday. And then also because survivors have had to walk away from their families, they're alone. Like if I'm going through my kids getting married right now, and having none of my family there is painful for me. It feels like a shame. It shouldn't be, but I feel shame that I can't even have a family, to represent. And it's painful. So holidays and people don't have a family, and sometimes their husband or wife will leave them and they find out they're an SRA survivor. They're completely alone. They have nobody. And that's a lot of survivors are there, and holidays are just a really rough thing for them to get through. So if you know survivors, reach out to them in the holidays, reach out to them around Halloween, see how they're doing. Just let them know you're on their side and that you care. It's not like you can fix it, but just knowing that people are there and reaching out is really sweet, and it's very helpful. And then survivors don't feel or putting up on social media. I know there's, SRA survivors out there, or Halloween survivors, however you want to say it. I want you to know that I'm really sorry. I care about you. If you need somebody to talk to, I'm here. And those sort of things can do a lot for people. Putting up, I don't celebrate Halloween. I see that on people's sites. I'm like, oh, thank God. It makes me happy. I'm not alone. And that's a nice thing too. So there are ways that everybody can reach out.
How do you recommend, especially parents? I'm not a parent, and so for me to step away from Halloween, I am more than happy to, because it always gave me a weird feeling anyways, and confirming that what I felt was valid and that it's even worse than I could have imagined. Like, I'll never celebrate Halloween again. But what about the parents that have kids that are used to going trick-or-treating and these traditions? Maybe there's a work celebration or obstacles that make it really hard to walk away. How do you recommend that parents or just people struggling with that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that do wish or want the courage to do it, and it's just hard. Like, how do I navigate this after I've been celebrating it, or my kids have already had 4 Halloweens where we've gone trick-or-treating and all their friends do it? What can people do to start walking away from that, especially from a parent side?
Certainly a process.
Yeah.
And the kids, especially if they've been celebrating it before, are going to feel bereft and that it's not fair. And that's okay. To talk to them child appropriately, depending on their age. I now understand that it's a bad holiday, that it's not celebrating anything good. So we're not going to celebrate it either. And as your kids get to be teens, talk to them. There's demonic stuff out there where they are sacrificing kids. They are kidnapping kids. We don't want to line up with that. Or there's a lot of scriptures in the Bible about not celebrating witchcraft or, seers, things like that. Bring out the Bible and say, God said has nothing to do with this. So if we are celebrating Halloween, then that means we are having something to do with witchcraft. And God said not to do that. So, make that line in the sand, explain to them, we're doing this together. We are not going to celebrate Halloween, and it might be painful. And then make a tradition to go instead. You can go out for ice cream, or you can, like we've started setting up our Christmas tree on Halloween, because then I can celebrate something that I can look at and enjoy. And then it gives me 2 months to enjoy it before Christmas anyway. We just started that last year. So that was helpful. Find something that you can do instead of as a family and make it that's what you do. Whatever that would be for you, whatever would be a nice thing for your kids. But it's important for our kids to know that we do make decisions and that we do make things that are not going to be popular, and that's okay. And it's okay to be hated on by the people around us. If that's what they're going to do, we can actually make it through that. And I think that those sort of things actually make our kids stronger, because going along with the crowd is never a good idea to teach your kids. That's going to come back to bite you every single time. So to teach your kids how to make stands against things, and to stand and to take all the criticism or take the bullying or whatever it is, and that you're still going to be okay, you're doing the right thing. And then we're teaching them to actually be stronger people in the process.
And I love the idea, like you said, about taking that day to do something positive. Doesn't mean that you can't have something to do, but like you said, worshiping God, the enemy is working overtime and then some on that day. And they have the participation of society helping them celebrate the demonic on that day. So being able to be on the side of the resistance and saying, I'm going to celebrate God this day. Like, I'm going to spend time with my family, reading the Bible, or something that has to do with God in your own tradition, going to church, whatever it is that you can do that day. Especially this year, Halloween falls on a Sunday. So people can go to church that day and celebrate God and bring energy towards something that they believe in, and that's more integrity with who they are. Maybe you can still have candy while you do that, right? So it's like you can still bring those things in, and you can still have something that you're doing with your family, but it doesn't have to be, like you said, doing what the crowd's doing.
Right. And we're able to do that. We're way stronger than we think we are. Our kids are way stronger than them credit for, but we got to teach them how. And this is a great opportunity to do it. Great opportunity
for adults too. I've already had three of my friends that they don't study all this stuff as much as me, but they support me. They know that it's happening. They're not as invested in it as me. So they're cheering me on and going, hey, I love what you're doing, and I've actually sent a couple of people your podcast that you did on Halloween. And I had a personal talk with another friend that I just had the opportunity to talk to about it. All three of those people said that they're not going to celebrate Halloween anymore.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I think too that it's amazing for adults what we can do, talking about this candidly and just saying, hey, you don't understand what actually happens on this day. You've been conditioned to think that it's this fun thing to celebrate, but like, here's the side of the story that you didn't know. And when people hear that, especially, I think it's more of a helpful conversation, obviously, with people who are awakened. If somebody's completely asleep and doesn't even believe in this stuff anyways, they're just going to think you're crazy if you're talking about it, but I think one person at a time, if you get one other person in your life that's not going to celebrate it, and then they pass that gift on, and they get two people that aren't going to celebrate it, and that moves, eventually the majority shrinks, right? And so eventually it won't be popular. It won't be the popular thing that society's doing. We'll have a different way to do it. And maybe there'll be a minority of people that don't walk away from that, but we have the power to change that with our decisions. And as much as we can say, well, what's it going to make a difference if I don't celebrate it this year? Yeah, but what if you go share that with somebody else that you trust and they make that choice, and then you create a ripple, and it might not even happen in our generation, but what if 2 generations from now, our kids don't at all celebrate it, and it's not something that's even in schools anymore. It's not something that is widely celebrated on a grand scale. Like, we can make that change over time, even if it's not immediate. It takes one person to break that cycle generationally of what you've been taught, and then to try to pass that gift on. And it's this subject, I think, for people who understand that it's happening, it's not a hard thing to convince people to pull away from, versus like Christmas. Somebody could say, well, wait a minute, that holiday seems like it's great. Like, we're celebrating Jesus, right? And thankfully, that's not one that is rooted in the demonic, But Halloween, like, it's just so obvious, you know, it's not as hard to convince people that, hey, this isn't what you think it is. And if you actually think about what it is, if you just look at it and see all the horror and the gore and the demons and the devils and the grim reapers, like you said, and the death, like, what are we, why are we celebrating that? It doesn't even make sense if you think about it logically. It's just we're so conditioned to be like, oh, it's Halloween again, you know, I'm experiencing it for the 30th time in my life and it's normal. And it's like, it's not normal though, if you actually think about it.
Right. And some people are like, we're just celebrating fall. I hear that. That's all we're doing. I'm like, well, do we celebrate spring? Do we celebrate winter? Do we celebrate summer? So why do we need to celebrate fall? It's just part of, the demonic smoke and confusion. And, it's like, yeah, you can justify it however you want, but it doesn't make it right.
Absolutely. And really, it's like you see somebody making a stance for that and you make that stance yourself. People notice that and they ask questions, and it's like I said, it's not a hard conversation to have around this because it's already there. You're just reinforcing and saying, hey, I know you've always looked at this in a positive light, but like actually look at it. Take your emotions and the memories out that you've had and like just look at the facts that like we're celebrating horror, we're watching horror movies, we're celebrating death. Like, what about that is celebratory, period, regardless of your memories? Right. And I think one person at a time, I have hope that people will walk away from this, especially awakened people as they learn. I think that there'll be a movement as this spreads and as more, podcasts like this and the episode that you made and going on the Save Our Children podcast and other survivors speaking about this. I think one person at a time, we're going to start to see a movement of people saying, why did I ever celebrate that? I'm not going to anymore. And then that also gives hope for people with kids, because then you might not be the isolated one anymore. You'll have groups that will slowly start to walk away that you can do different traditions with, or have the kids go play or read Bible verses, whatever it is, cook, do something that's serving God and serving your family and still bringing you close, just not what everybody else is doing.
And I think you'll find stronger families. Because when you start as a family having causes and having understanding and having a strong walk with God, you're creating a healthy dynamic in your family. Because if you were really just somebody that's going along with the crowd because that's the easy thing to do, then you really don't have a strong family. And then you have very wishy-washy people who can't stand up for anything. We have to learn how to stand up and make stands and be okay with people being upset with us. It's not the end of the world. We can do that.
I love that. And I hope people listening, I hope that gives people courage, and like I said, I'm not celebrating it. Lisa's not celebrating it. So already you're not alone. If you're thinking about walking away from it, we can all jump on a Zoom call on Halloween day and do our own thing, but I encourage people. Lisa did a great episode on her podcast too, which I'm going to link below, that she talks how this ties into God a little bit more than we did on here, and talks about Abe and different parts of the Bible and how that applies to Halloween too. And she ties all into it. So I'll link that below for you guys to go watch, but take that episode and share it. I think it was 12 minutes. It was not a hard thing to digest, and it was short. And a lot of people that I know, like, they might not listen to an hour, but they'll go listen to 12 minutes. Like, go send that to people if you're not comfortable having that conversation. Because it can be kind of hard to bring that up if it's not something you normally talk about. But luckily for you, people like Lisa are creating content that you can go easily share. And I encourage you guys to do that. It's going to take one person at a time. Like, we're never going to hear on TV to not celebrate Halloween. That's always going to be propagated that we need to, this movement has to start with us, where we say, I'm taking a stand, and the more that we do that and that we come together and do it, like, I really believe that change can happen. And that's what's really exciting for me, is seeing more people have these conversations. And for you, Lisa, like how I was saying earlier, your whole journey with how you've evolved from where you said you were, crippled on the couch, just crying and not able to function, not even feeling capable of raising your children, going from there to where you are now. You have a podcast, you're writing books, and I'd love for you to talk about your newest one, because that's so exciting. Congratulations, by the way. That's
Thank you.
Amazing. You have 2 books under your sleeve now, and I know that you're just scratching the iceberg on where you're going with this, and this is just the tip for you. But I'd love for you to talk about your new book also, because I think that's really exciting, and I think people are going to find a lot of value in it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's called You've Got the Wrong Guy. Here's a picture of it. Fun fact, this is my husband. So I've started his silhouette cover career.
That's
very,
awesome.
very kind to do that. But it's about people that misunderstand God because of the trauma that they've been through. A lot of times they think bad things that happen to them are because God allowed it. So like SRA happened to me, and some people say to me, aren't you glad that God allowed that so you can be where you are now? It's like, number one, no, that was never God's design for me. That was my parents' decision. They went against what God, their job was to protect me and keep me safe. They chose instead to put me in the worst place you can possibly put a child, is in rituals. That was their decision. So people think that God's allowable will means that he's lining up with it. And if you believe that, really what you're saying is then God is in cahoots with the devil with everything that's going on. And that's absolutely not true. God's total will was Eden. Adam and Eve were there. Everything was perfect. Everything was provided for. There was peace, safety. And then the devil came through with the snake and brought in this question, well, God doesn't want you to eat of this apple because he knows you'll be like him. So then he started questioning God's integrity, and that was enough to confuse Adam and Eve. So they sinned. They got kicked out of God's will, and then they got into the devil's will. And so that's where we are now. The devil's considered the prince of this world, and he has a lot of authority here. He tricks people, and then he's tricking them again by saying, well, God didn't stop it, therefore he wanted it. And then people don't trust God. And I have found that there's a lot of people that they really don't know God's integrity and who he is. And then they're putting what the devil's doing onto God and saying it's God's fault. So you've got the wrong guy. Is if something evil happened to you, you should be mad at the devil, not at God. God's the one that comes in, delivers us, heals us. He sets us free. He wants us to have peace that passes understanding. He wants us to be able to sleep without nightmares. You know, he wants us to be able to enjoy this beautiful world that he created for us. We were talking earlier about how he cloaked the world in greens and blues because those are calming colors for us. He didn't have to do that. He could have put red and bright yellow. And then we would have always been like, just shaking and like this. But God is really a good God. And he sent Jesus to save us all and to heal us and to protect us and to get us to a good place. And that's what God did in my life. The devil was out to destroy me. God was out to set me free and put me into a good place. And so that's what the premise of this book is about. So let's understand what the devil's doing. Let's understand what God's doing. And then let's get as close to God as we possibly can get, because that's where safety is. And that's where good things are. And that's where the joy of life is. And I've gotten to a place where I'm pretty happy, very much at peace, and can enjoy my days, and that's because I can understand the line in the sand. John 10:10 says, the thief, which is the devil, comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So if you see killing, stealing, and destroying, that's of the devil. It says, but I have come, this is Jesus talking, that you may have life and have it more abundantly. So the things of life and of goodness, that's all God's construct. And that's the way he intended for it to be in the first place. So understanding that helps you to understand what's happening in your life, to evaluate it. Say, okay, is this of the devil or is this of God? If it's the devil, let's get rid of it. Let's kick it out. Let's heal from it. And if it's God, then let's get as close to him as we can get, because that's the good place to be.
Now, what for you, because I know everybody's a little bit different, what was your first step that you can recall taking when you started to have those fears towards God? Because especially for ritual abuse survivors, your idea of God was incorporated invertedly into what you went through. So you were brought up with Jesus and God, but the way that it was presented to you, how do you trust right? That has to be really hard for somebody who's been through what you did. Like, how do I trust God after your whole image of what you were brought up to believe that he was actually wasn't, right? And because
Right.
you're learning it inverted. So
Right.
what was your first step in rebuilding that trust and getting over that fear that you initially had when seeking God out?
So the demonic in the rituals is very complicated because they pull in Christian things and then they twist it in really bad ways. So one thing my dad was I was never good enough. So I excelled at everything I did. I was all conference shortstop for my softball team in high school. And he said if I'd been on a real team, I wouldn't have even made it. I was valedictorian. He said if you'd been in a real school, you would not have done that. And it was, just no matter what it was, there was a reason why it wasn't good. So I took that over to God as well. I'll get to heaven, but just maybe. But then I think I said it before, when he rejoices over me with singing, he's happy with me. I am okay. And so I had to move my dad out of the way so that I could see that God accepts me as I am. And that because Jesus died for me, for my sins, to forgive me, that means that taking everything I've done wrong and gotten rid of it as far as God's concerned. So God sees me as perfect and I'm okay with God. And then I can rejoice in that. I don't have to perform for God. He doesn't love me because I did X, Y, and Z, or, because I did this right or that right. He just loves me just because I am, just because he made me, he made you, and he rejoices in that. He's like, oh, Emma, you're so wonderful. Look at you, and that doesn't mean that we're still doing wrong things and we need to improve and work to do right. We still do that because we love him. But because I have that relationship, I was able to be safe there. And when you're an SRA survivor, everything is about safety. I need to feel safe. And knowing that I am safe with God, that Eden was what he had for me, that he didn't want anything bad. And to this day, if something bad happens to me, like let's say I get sick, that's not what he wants for me. And I know that. So then I can pray and believe in healing. So now some people go, well, God wanted you sick because he wanted to teach you something. It's like, no, there's no scriptures that back that up. He says, by Jesus' stripes, you were healed. He says, I sent my word and healed them. He said, I'll put none of these diseases upon you, for I am the Lord that heals you. So there's all these scriptures that are rich that say the opposite of that and that tell me who God really is. So for me, it's reveling in that relationship and in that world that God has given me. So even though I still have storms, there's still things that come that I have to fight against, and it's still difficult. Doesn't mean my life's easy, but it means I have a place to go to when life is hard. And that's what's made all the difference for me. So going from crying on the couch every day, terrified, sleep, being awake during the night, keeping an eye on all my kids' doors so that nobody came in to take them, he got me from there to, Lisa, it's okay. I'm taking care of you. I've got your kids. It talks about angels keeping us safe and calling them in. Lord, you said there's angels around my kids. I call that in. I thank you for that. And then I can sleep because I know God's watching over them. And now I've got grandkids. God is watching over them. And I can take comfort in that. And it doesn't mean that life's easy, but it means that life is doable when I have God with me in it. So because of SRA, it's given me this understanding of God at a fundamental level that I can see the difference of what God's doing and what the devil's doing. And because I don't have that crossover and that confusion, I can who God actually really is. And that he really is trustworthy. He really is safe. He really has good things for me, and he wants good, and he didn't want any of those negative things to happen to me. Did not want SRA for me at all on any level. Now he's used it to heal me, to set me free, and he's given me this platform now to be able to talk about him, which is amazing, but it doesn't mean that he lined up with the devil, hey, let's do these horrible things to Lisa. No, he's pure, he wouldn't do that. And I like that about
And there's that free will element too, right? That people I think can get misconstrued if they don't understand, where it's like you said, they think that Jesus and God were in cahoots with the devil when his job isn't to control anything. He's the complete opposite of control and of what Satan stands for, and he gives everybody free will, even the devil himself.
Right. And my parents had that free will and they chose to go the devil's way. And, I don't understand it at all. It was a bad decision. Each one of us will stand before God on the decisions that we make. We can do better. We don't have our parents did, no matter what our parents did wrong. And all of us, I made mistakes with my kids too, and I expect them to do better. It's like when they start realizing the mistakes that I made, good, do better for your kids. I expect that. My husband and I fixed a lot of stuff coming from both our families, but we didn't fix everything, and that's where each generation, let's do better. Let's be better. Let's pass on better things. We can do that. My kids were not in rituals. Thank God. We were able to for them. Stop that for my grandchildren.
That'll never continue again in your lineage.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're aware and my kids know what to look for and, they know it's out there.
Oh my gosh. And from what your immediate family, nobody left, right? You were the one that had to leave and isolate yourself. So, it is rare that people leave, and it's just, that can be with anything. You stopped something generational that was so traumatic, and it would have been so traumatic if you would have continued to carry that down generations. But even for people who haven't gone through something that traumatic, think about really bad dietary habits that you're carrying down to your kids that you had from your parents, or stress habits, or anything, right? We're all toxic in our own way, and that's so powerful that we always have that choice to say, it stops with me, it stops right here. It might have gone on forever, but this is where it stops. And that gift, like, I get goosebumps just thinking about like how powerful your mission is, Lisa, and like what you're doing, and just the bright light that you are, and the example of how unbreakable the human spirit is, right? They tried every way to break you. They did everything possible to break your spirit, and you walked away from that, and you're here smiling today and worshiping God and Jesus and preaching his word and sharing your story and making these tremendous impacts, whether it's in church or on your podcast or writing books. And you are just, you're a hero to me in every single way, and just such an inspiration. And I'm so grateful that you're out there doing this, because I know these topics are heavy. It's not easy to even hear, much less to talk about. And I imagine that every time that you talk about it, it probably gets easier to an extent, but it's still not something I'm sure that you care to think about all the time and to talk about all the time. And I want to commend you for being able to do that, because your content, it really is making a difference. And more people are waking up to this, and they're going to need avenues and resources that they can learn more about this, because it's hard to find content and resources. And as you know, many survivors either don't leave or they're censored. So the fact that you have a voice and you're using it, it's just so beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying. It just shows that God's bigger than the devil. The devil thinks he's so powerful, and a lot of people follow him, but God's bigger. He's the end result is God wins. We just got to go through these years, make it through, but God is in control of the end, and it's going to end right.
Now, for people who are interested in purchasing one or both your books, which I encourage people to buy both, where can people go get your books? Where are you at with that?
I'm on Amazon, Kindle, and then Barnes and Noble online also has them. So, and if all else fails, contact me and I can get you one.
Maybe with an autograph, potentially.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have all of that linked below. So for people who do want to support, just go in the show notes and I'll link up Kindle and Amazon, which I think are on the same platform. Isn't Kindle with Amazon? Yeah.
Yes.
You guys can purchase one or the other or both. And then the Barnes and Noble link I'll also put down there. And then Lisa, where can people find you for your podcast? Where can they find you online? How can people connect with you otherwise and support you?
Only God Rescued Me is the name of my memoir. So that's what I have. Everything under podcast, Instagram, Facebook, you can find me there, or Lisa Meister, you can find me there as well. So,
Okay.
and I do answer people. I've got a team that helps me to do that because we get a lot of people contacting us. So we are responsive and we will get back to you. And just for survivors to know you're not alone. There's a lot of us out there. And, we had to go through abuse alone. We should not have to go through healing alone. So I also have some Facebook groups that are closed that you can find. So if you contact me, I can put you in contact and get you there. We've got a lot of survivors. We talk about memories, talk about healing, talk about God, try to encourage each other. And a lot of people are really struggling right now trying to get through Halloween. Don't be alone. Find some people that can help you and support you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You're such a bright light, and it's always awesome to connect with you. I know I haven't even personally talked to you in a little bit, so this just felt like I got to get caught up on your life. And I appreciate you coming on here and being my first episode of my second season. What an honor to have you here today. And I know people are going to find so much tremendous value. So just thank you for taking the time to come on here today.
You're welcome. And congratulations. I'm so excited about your new year. You're doing really good work. Thank you.
We both are. It's awesome getting to be voices for victors and, to hopefully make a difference. I hope that there's going to be many more instances that we see in the world of survivors and non-survivors breaking traditions that were toxic, that they don't want to carry down anymore, and it starts by having these hard conversations. And so for people listening, please support Lisa, support survivors. I know it's tempting to want to donate and support nonprofits, and that's still doing something if there's nothing else that you're able to do if you don't have time. But I always say go directly to the survivors, support their projects personally, invest in them, buy their books, go tune into their podcasts, connect directly with them. So you know exactly where your dollar's going. We know that not all nonprofits, we don't always know where our dollar ends up at the end of the day. And we can always hope that it goes somewhere good, but go buy her books and support her and show her some love. She's giving you guys really affordable and free information that's going to teach you a lot about how the world works. It's going to help answer questions that maybe you didn't hear on here. It's going to help fill you in on her story and some of the insight that she has that a lot of us don't. And you're paying attention with more than just your dollar. We invest with our energy and our time, and we have to be very aware of that, because just like what we were talking about with Halloween, what do we want to give our energy to? I think all of us, if you're listening to this, you're probably devoted to giving your energy to things that are going to help make the world better. And it starts with one little habit at a time, giving up Halloween, taking your dollar and your energy and supporting somebody like Lisa instead of maybe the top 20 pop artists that you're supporting that might not be working under integrity like Lisa is. So I encourage you guys to please connect with her, write her reviews, subscribe to her podcast, connect with her on Instagram and the other platforms she's on. I'll have that all listed below. And do the same for us. This is a small podcast too, and it helps getting the word out. I don't have the same, I guess, ability to do things like monetize with this. Like, I'll never be able to do that with this podcast. I'm never going to be featured anywhere because of the material that I'm talking about. And it's not about that for me, but it makes it really hard for a message like what I'm trying to spread on here and what Lisa is. We're always going to be put to the bottom of the barrel with who these platforms are willing to help promote and help support. So your support goes a long way with sharing and subscribing and writing reviews. And if you guys find value in this, I hope that you'll do that with Lisa and I's podcast, and that you'll share it with your friends so we can help get the word out of these hard conversations. And just thank all of you guys again for listening for the past year. It's such an honor to get to spend this time with you guys and to have your support with the survivors, and that you care and you're invested in learning about their stories. So just thank you, whoever you are sitting at the other side of the screen or of your phone. Thank you guys for being here and supporting too. And Lisa, I can't wait to connect with you again. We'll have to bring you on another time, maybe sooner than the amount of time that we've gone on last time, because you're so insightful and awesome to talk to. So congratulations on your new book. Congratulations on your podcast that you've been doing now. It's almost been a year for you too. In March, you said, right?
Yeah. Hard to believe.
So you're almost there too. We're going to have a celebration for you too. So just congratulations on everything you're doing too. I couldn't be more proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for joining, Lisa. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you guys next week.